Hi everybody and welcome to another piano comparison video here on the Merriam Pianos YouTube channel. My name is Stu Harrison and in today's video we're comparing the Casio PX-S1100 with Roland FP-10. They are in a similar price range. They are both portable, weighted 88-note digital pianos with great sound, great action. We're going to be talking about all of the sounds and tones included on this. We're going to be going through its action and all of the other functionality, and giving you the best comparison we possibly can. So thank you so much for joining us for the video. If it is the first time that you have joined us here on the channel, please hit that subscribe and notification bell. If you like what you're seeing and you want to come back to see more, we'd love to have you. Without further ado, let's get started right away with this comparison. We're continuing to put the new PX-S1100 through its paces. We've already done a full review on its own, so if you want to check that out, please do so. We have also compared it to Yamaha's P125, and in this video, as we said in the intro, we're going to be taking a comparison look at the 1100 versus the Roland FP-10. Now, it's not something we mention in a lot of our videos, but if you go down in the description, not only will you find a lot more information about the instrument, you'll also find links to purchase these pianos no matter where you are in the world. Let's get started first with sound. Now, sound to piano players, well, all instrumentalists, is just so critical to the enjoyment of any instrument. If you can't vibe with the sound, it's really hard to connect with it. I would say that action is also really quite critical. Some people are going to prioritize action over sound, others are going to prioritize sound over action. With digital pianos, I actually would say that the action, to me, tends to be a priority, but it's not going to be that way for everybody. We're going to start talking about the piano tone generator on these two instruments because they're actually quite similar. And when you look at the landscape of what other instruments are available in this price range, and it's slim pickings, really. You're only talking about maybe 5-6 instruments in the whole industry that are available in these types of price ranges with fully weighted 88 keys, decent sound on the onboard speakers, nice modern piano tone available, actions that feel good. There's not too many. So the FP-10 and the 1100 are in rare company. And when you look at the tone generators they have, and specifically how they focus on the piano sound, we're probably looking at the two most sophisticated ones on the market. The FP-10 isn't actually officially supposed to have connectivity with Roland's Piano Designer, but certainly at the time we're making this, I'm still able to connect Piano Designer to this instrument and access all sorts of parameters and edits that are lurking under the hood of Roland's supernatural piano engine, and it gives you access to things like how far the lid is open, and the damper resonance, and the string resonance, and hammer noise, and key off noise, and a number of things that allow you to increase the level of realism that come to you as part of the piano sound. Well, Casio has actually the same thing. And now with the addition of the Bluetooth, both can be accessed and connected to wirelessly with their company's respective apps. Let's listen to the Casio first, and then we're going to go over and listen to the Roland. The Casio is definitely the newer of the bunch. This model is only a couple of months old, really, whereas the FP-10 is a similar age to, say, the Yamaha P125. It's been out for, I think, coming up on about 3 years. As far as I know, FP-10 is still an instrument which is continuing to be produced by Roland. Certainly, it continues to be a popular model for us. The 1100, of course, has quite a bit of shelf life ahead of it, having just been released. It's a very dynamic sound the Casio's managed to render out of this instrument. And you have a lot of variety in terms of the tonal palette from soft to loud. And the volume gradient on this, the dynamic range on it is also quite a bit bigger than you normally get. Yeah, really a nice musical experience playing that instrument. Now let's hop on to the FP-10. It's also quite a nice experience. I am hearing more tonal variety, I think, out of the Casio. But in terms of the dynamic range, it feels like they both have quite a nice gradient. I would say the Casio might even have a slightly greater dynamic range to it, tonal and dynamic. One big surprise when getting these two side by side was how well the FP-10 speakers actually stack up. I thought honestly this was going to be a blowout. We've got two speakers on the Casio, 8 watts apiece, facing out with some tone ports so that your ear is getting a little more direct, or at least that's the theory in Casio's mind. And so I thought slightly more direct sound, it's a more up-to-date speaker, and more powerful. Next to the Roland, which is 6 watts aside, and you've got the speakers that are facing down. So side by side, I was really expecting a fairly muddy, underwhelming sound from the Roland, and I gotta say that in some ways it feels like I get even more bass response out of the Roland than I do out of the Casio. I think there is a little more clarity and detail that I'm getting out of the Casio, but the Roland from a sort of a substantiveness standpoint doesn't feel hollow, doesn't feel weak, doesn't feel, well, yeah, it's the best way to put it, is I expected a much bigger experiential difference between these two sets of speakers. And really, they stack up very, very nicely next to each other. It's not an identical experience, but it's not one that is kind of overshadowed by some kind of power indifference or power indifference. Now, Roland has made a compromise, and a couple of compromises on the FP-10, which they make up for in the FP-30X. But to keep the price point down where it is and still offer the action that's on here, and we are going to get to that in a later section talking about the action, they have scaled back the polyphony so that they can keep the complexity of the sound higher without having to keep the two balanced. So this has a polyphony of 96. That is going to sound low because it is low compared to most other instruments that are being released 2021, 2022. The question is whether you as a player are ever going to max 96 out. There are certainly some circumstances, 100% some circumstances, where if you were using two sounds at once, if you were layering two sounds at once, it's actually fairly easy to use up 96. When you're just playing piano, unless you get into some fairly advanced classical music, 96 should be okay. It's not going to do wonders if you're playing 16-track MIDI back through here, if you're layering instruments up. 96 is definitely on the low side. For people who are just sticking to piano, you should be okay, but there may be some circumstances where you do start to get some note cancellation if you're really playing some intense classical music that's all over the place with the pedal down, etc., etc. With 196 over on the Casio, you're definitely never going to hit any kind of, 192 rather, you're never going to hit that limit. So it may be more of a theoretical drawback than a practical one, but certainly people who are reading spec sheets are going to notice that difference. They may want to know what that's all about. I've mentioned the tone generator several times and some of the parameters that you have available to edit. Both of these apps, or both of these instruments rather, come with apps that give you the opportunity to edit some of those sounds. And I'm just going to go through a few more of the types of options that are available to you particularly on the Casio, because I know in some regions, or even some people with certain OS updates or firmware updates on the FP-10, the piano designer may not be available. So it's not exactly fair to bring that up if in fact you happen to be one of the ones that just don't have access to Piano Designer through that app. So let's get the Cordana app up here, and we're just going to go through some of the really cool options that we've got to edit sound. So in this particular case, we've got string resonance, we've got damper resonance, damper noise, key on action noise, key off action noise, and there's a default setting which it just calls tone, but then you can also set every one of those things to a particular value between 1 and 4. The damper resonance and string resonance are really going to be the ones that truly change the tonal color or the tonal quality of that instrument. You've also got an option to get into the sound source and keyboard. We'll just load that up. This is where you have touch response. You've also got the option to turn on and off duet mode. You can set your scale type. So that would be whether it's equal temperament or some other option. You've got tuning. And then, of course, for both, you have also the option to remote control the various types of sounds that you're using. In terms of sounds other than the piano tone, because we've talked about the piano tone, talked about the speakers, talked about the tone generator. When you get into the other tones, this has approximately 14 or 15. Let's see, 4, then we've got 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Wow, 15. There you go. And I know over on the Casio we've got 18. So just like the P125 and the ES110, a very similar level of all of your standards, all your basic tones that you're going to need in any sort of a basic professional environment, or all the ones that you might think of that you just want to play around with when you're at home. So let's hear some of those. We've already heard the concert piano from Roland. Here's piano number 2. Piano number 3. Definitely much darker. Number 4. And then you get into your E pianos. Couple of harpsichords on here. Harpsichord 2. I guess that's just like an octave vibraphone. Organ. think Roland generally has some of the best organ synthesized sounds out there. Organ 2. And then finally your strings. A bit more of an attack to it. So that's the whole range of sounds that you get on the FP-10. Over on the Casio, a very similar number, and we're just going to give you a quick sample of those as well. We'll get our Chordana app up here because it's a lot easier to select. One thing about the Casio that I love and hate equally and simultaneously is the look of the instrument is killer. They've done a great job of creating this slick, contemporary, yeah, I mean, it's not even unlike like the newest kind of Samsung or Apple electronic devices that you might expect to find. But it also means that there's not a lot of onboard controls that are as intuitive as some other instruments. Now, that is quickly overcome by the addition of a remote device. Because as soon as you get the Bluetooth connected, the Chordana app is actually really well done. It's not necessarily the most advanced looking app, but it's very functional. It's well laid out, works, and it's easy then to navigate all the functions that you would normally have to use lots of shortcut commands and a user manual to get. Something that I like about, say, the FP-10 or even the P-125 does this quite well is there's a lot of labels that I don't think detract that much from the aesthetic of the instrument, and it kind of just avoids having to have the manual out. However, by the same token, as I said, you get your device, then you don't need the manual, you can do everything, and I kind of prefer controlling instruments from a device like this anyway, because often you're become aware of functionality that otherwise you wouldn't have even used, because it's there on the screen. So let's listen now to some of the sounds that the Casio has. Here's the grand piano. Here is piano bright. And mellow. And rock piano. As I mentioned in the review where we totally dedicated it to this instrument, this is called jazz piano. What a weird name for this. It is kind of a cool electric LA sound. Or whatever. Then we get into electric piano. Yeah, kind of a very subtle chorus effect in there. And then probably a whirly. harpsichord. Vibes. And then finally, the last few into strings. And Casios are a little warmer, it sounds like. Those string sounds that have that shorter attack or decay, it's always a little bit weird to play on its own. And then some organs. Pretty decent. Yeah, that kind of gospel-y sound at the end is probably the best one. So it's a whole mix of stuff on there, and certainly there's some stronger aspects coming out of the Roland on some of the non-piano sounds. When it comes to the core piano sound, I think it's really a matter of personal preference, but I do, as I said, going right back to the beginning of the review, hear a little more tonal variety, at least on the default settings out of the Casio, actually, and probably a slightly greater dynamic range. Not necessarily talking about speaker output, just in terms of signal, the dynamic range that the Casio is putting out. Anyway, we're going to be back in just a second with our second section on action. This is going to be definitely worth sticking around because it's such an important component to talk about between these two instruments. Thanks so much for being with us. Now, there may be people out there thinking that the FP-10 is yesterday's news and that there's lots of reasons why maybe it doesn't stack up to something like the newer models coming out from the likes of Casio or Kawai or even Roland itself with the new FP-30X, etc., etc. Well, here's a really big reason why I think the FP-10 is still worth a tremendously serious consideration if you're in this kind of price range. And we're talking like $600, $700, $800 price range. And action has got to be at the top of the list. The FP-10 is a tiny little keyboard built around a PHA-4 action. And the PHA-4 action is the action that Roland uses in all of their digital pianos right up to about the $2,000 price point. It's a very capable action. It's got triple sensors. It's got escapement. The weighting on it is nearly perfect in terms of my own preference for actions. I love playing on this action. And they've managed to stuff it in the FP-10 and still keep the weight on the FP-10 down under 30 pounds. I think it's 27 or 28 pounds that the FP-10 clocks in. So it's not nearly as light as the PX-S1100 that comes in at 24.5 pounds. So it is getting close to like a 4 or 5 pound difference or something between these two instruments. But if the only sacrifice is a few pounds and what you get in return is the PHA-4 action, well, that just might be worth it. I've said this a couple of years ago when the FP-10 first came out, and I'm going to say it again. I think for the money, if action is the top of your priority, this is a really hard instrument to beat. And definitely for me, from a pianistic standpoint, it is a stronger argument for people who are already experienced players than, say, the PX-S1100. In addition to all of those things that I mentioned, it's also got a faux ivory key top on the white and kind of a matte key. It's also got sort of a pebbled or a speckled kind of matte finish or a sprayed matte finish on the black key. It's not a high gloss. So it's got a really nice glide factor to the key. And they're also really robust. I know from personal experience that I've had these actions out in gigging situations and in studio situations, and they stand up to a tremendous amount of punishment. Looking over at the Casio, I do certainly have some nice things to say about this action as well, but not the same things. For its weight, I am seriously impressed by how reinforced the key bed of the Casio is. When you really, really lay into this thing, there's almost no give, or no give at all. Oh, how about we get back to a piano? And I think the key action sound on the Casio is actually less than what you get on the Roland. And I'm just going to kind of quickly test that theory. Oh yeah, like, that's a huge difference. If you're going to be playing this with headphones, the Roland is wasn't that interesting? Get these both turned back on again. Now with the Casio, it is a very compacted action. It also has two sensors. It also has escapement. So both by spec and by feel, if the whole point here is to evaluate these two instruments simply on action, I'm afraid the Roland just runs away with this. But it's never that simple. You have to look at the whole totality of the instrument. There's going to be a lot of people where action is important, but they're not willing to sacrifice all kinds of other things to get a 10% better action or 15% better action. So this action, from a spec standpoint, very similar to, say, something like a Yamaha P125, no escapement, double sensor. It is compacted, and so the further you get into the key bed, the more unnatural it's going to feel. The further you are towards the outside of the key bed where most people are playing, the more natural it's going to feel. So you have to know your own style of playing, or how advanced you already are, or how advanced you intend to become on this instrument. And just know that this is not an action designed for literally all styles of piano playing and all piano players. So be aware of that, particularly if you're comparing it to something like the FP-10. The behavior on the FP-10 keyboard is going to be a little more acoustic piano-like than what you get over here. But you still are getting some nice textured key surfaces on the PX-S1100, and the weight of the key when you're playing sort of normal repertoire and in the normal range of the key feels slightly lighter than the Roland, very, very similar to what you would find on the P125 or, say, Kawai ES110, which is another very good comparison in this particular range. From a repetition speed standpoint, I don't detect much of a difference there at all. They both repeat at about the same, although it feels like the Roland key, because there's a bit more heft to it, returns slightly slower, although it doesn't seem to reflect in the repetition speed, so go figure. We're going to be back for a third section where we're going to run over all of the other features about this instrument that doesn't have to do with its core sound or the action. So please stick around. Thank you so much for being with us for this comparison. We'll see you in a second. There are some important differences between these two instruments when it comes to other functions and options. There are some pluses on the Casio side. This thing runs on batteries, and not some crazy D-cell batteries. You can run this off AA batteries, which is pretty unusual, and not 40 of them. I think it's 6 or 8 that you need. So you get yourself a few packs of rechargeables, and you can throw this in the car or whatever, go to a park, go to a cottage, go to a friend's house, jam. You don't need to worry about being right next to a power outlet. That's a pretty cool feature. The 1100 now also comes with a USB adapter, which gives you Bluetooth functionality, not just MIDI, but also audio. So you can stream audio to this and use these onboard speakers as a sound source, which is very cool. This also works with a triple pedal, which is not something that is available, for example, on the Roland FP-10. The FP-10, you can only use it with a single pedal, although you can upgrade that to a substantial single pedal. But if triple pedal was something that was really important to you, well, you're kind of out of luck over on the Roland. It's very light and slim. We already mentioned that. It comes in 3 colors, and then you get all of the other standard features that come with most digital pianos. Transpose, split, layer. You've got a built-in metronome. You've got a built-in basic recorder as well. And you can connect via USB to a computer if you absolutely need to. Over on the Roland, you've got built-in Bluetooth, but it's only Bluetooth MIDI, no Bluetooth audio. And here's a really big one, depending on what you're going to be using this for. The Casio comes with dual 1/4 inch outputs. If you're thinking about using this for gigging, and I do know people, professional players, who are using, if not this exact model, a very similar model from Casio in professional environments. This doesn't have the 1/4 inch outputs. It means you're taking a little 3.5 mil stereo jack and having to split that out with adapters and other cables to get it in. Plus, there's no way to turn the local speakers on with an FP-10. So it's kind of either or, and there's no easy way to do it. You're always going to be fiddling with the adapters. So it's not ideal. The FP-30 had this problem too until they updated it with the FP-30X and included the 1/4 inch adapters. So that's a really big plus that the Casio has for certain people that you're not going to be getting with the Roland. So Bluetooth MIDI, but not Bluetooth audio. You're missing out on the pedal, or the triple pedal. You're missing out on the 1/4 inch outputs. A very similar level of tones, as we've said. They all have the same kind of thing with the basic record. Now, with record on this, you're going to have to do that recording using the connection to the Piano Partner 2 app, and then you can record back and forth through there. So there's certainly some functionality that you get that way. They both come with the company apps. So when we look at all of this together, what you have is still a great sounding, great feeling digital piano in the form of the Roland FP-10, which if you're using it primarily focused on piano or maybe like piano roads kind of stuff, and maybe you're using it in a studio setting for MIDI input because of that killer action, or you're just gigging or practicing on it, I mean, you're going to be in good shape. And it's just a killer option, particularly because of the action. If you're looking for an all-rounder that's got a little more functionality, certainly has a bit more of an updated aesthetic look to it, the 1100 is a super compelling option, and it's all in and around the same price range. You've got the Bluetooth audio now, the battery operated functionality, you've got 3 colors to choose from. So an interesting mix of features on both sides to choose from, but very clear choice really, which is a lot more functionality, but a sort of average to above average action in my opinion, but not a great action. You've got a killer action over in the FP-10 with really good sound, okay speakers, but otherwise a very stripped down function. Hope you've enjoyed the comparison. Hope you've enjoyed the channel. If it's the first time you've come to see us, we would love for you to subscribe, become a regular commenter, because we've got an amazing community out there of commenters and viewers and watchers. And so, you know, join, come along, be part of it. My name is Stu Harrison. This has been Merriam Pianos on YouTube, and we will see you again soon.